Okay, hello there. This is Dr. A once again. And for today, we're going to have the different diseases and their oncology. So for today, we're just going to discuss three of the most common oncologic disorders that we could encounter. Okay, so the first one is the lung cancer. So sometimes lung cancer is also known as our bronchogenic carcinoma. Okay, so bronchogenic carcinoma. For our lung cancer, we have different etiology. Okay, so for our etiologies, just be reminded of our alphabet. We have the A, B, C, D, E, and F. Okay, so letter A stands for the air pollutant. So usually, because of the polluted air that we are inhaling, so it might be the triggering factor or the cause on why we could develop lung cancer. Maybe it could be secondary to the diesel exhaust or through the silica that are within the air that we are breathing in. So another possible etiology of lung cancer is bacterial infection. If you had or if you always have for example, pulmonary tuberculosis, that would also increase the possibility of you acquiring lung cancer. And of course, for letter C, we have cigarette smoking. Actually, according to researches and studies, around 80 to 90% of the cases of lung cancer are secondary to cigarette smoking. Okay, so aside from that, it is not only the first hand, but we also have the second hand and the third hand smokers. Okay, so next into it, we have the diet. For our diet, um, what we have is if you are a smoker and you could take in quite a lot of beta carotene, or if there's an arsenic in the water that you are drinking, it could also increases the possibility of you on acquiring lung cancer. So the next one is for letter E. Our letter E is the environmental hazards. So these are secondary to the other things that we are exposed at. For example, if you are working in the laboratory and you are always prone in inhaling different substances like arsenic, or if you are living in a house which is built way ages ago, so which has still the asbestos component, so it could also be a possible trigger for you to be able to develop lung cancer. And lastly, of course, we all know that our different oncologic disorders are usually attributed with familial history. It is within our genes, okay? So basically, because of this etiology that we have, we are prone with different carcinogens, okay? Once we are already exposed with those carcinogens, by the way, when we deal or when we talk about carcinogens, it means that these are the substances that are precursor or that could be a catalyst of having different type of cancer. Okay, so once we are exposed with the carcinogens, we are going to have those initial exposure. Okay, so they call it as an initiation. However, for example, if you're working on that environment, if you are always exposed or constant exposure on those things, it would just promote the susceptibility of yourself in acquiring the lung cancer. And thus, it will involved in the abnormal DNA mutation and cell division that could progress into tumor. And once there's a tumor in our lungs, it could lead to the obstruction. Later on, when we are going to deal with the different signs and symptoms, with the different manifestations, we would be able to see what is the effect of this tumor, what are the effect of the obstruction that they have. Okay, so most likely we already know the answer that it could hinder the breathing of the person. Okay, so however, before moving with our signs and symptoms, let us first discuss the different types of lung cancer. Okay, so for our lung cancer, we have two major types of lung cancer. One is the non-small cell lung cancer, and the other one is the small cell lung cancer. Okay, so when we deal with our non-small cell lung cancer or NSCLC, so it is stated that around 80 to 85% of lung cancer are under the non-small cell lung cancer. This particularly has subtypes, okay? And the subtypes of the NSCLC are the adenocarcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, and the large cells carcinoma. Okay, so let's start first with adenocarcinoma. Adenocarcinoma starts in the cell that would normally secrete substances like mucus. Okay, so this type of lung cancer occurs mainly in current or former smokers, but it is also the most common type of lung cancer seen in non-smokers. That's why I'm telling that lung cancer could be secondary not only for those who are first-hand smokers, but even those with second and third-hand smokers. Okay, so it is more common among women than in men, and it is more likely to occur in younger people than other types of lung cancer. So our adenocarcinoma is usually found in the outer parts of the lung and is more likely to be found before it has spread. So that is a good thing about adenocarcinoma because usually before it spread, it is already been found, unlike the other type of cancers that we're going to deal later on. Okay, so people with adenocarcinoma are called to have, or people with the type of adenocarcinoma, which is called adenocarcinoma in situ. Okay, in situ. So basically, um, before, those adenocarcinoma in situ are called as bronchiolo-alveolar carcinoma. Okay, bronchiolo-alveolar carcinoma that tends to have a better outlook than those with the other types of lung cancer. Okay, so aside from the subtype of adenocarcinoma, we also have the squamous cell carcinoma. That is our second subtype of the non-small cell lung cancer. So squamous cell carcinomas start in the squamous cells. It starts with the squamous cells, meaning to say that they starts on flat cells that line the inside of the airway of our lungs. So they are often linked to the history of smoking and tend to be found in the central part of the lungs. So usually it is seen near on the main airway. So usually they could be seen lined at the bronchus. Okay? And the last subtype that we have are the large cells carcinoma or the undifferentiated carcinoma. So large cell carcinoma can appear in any part of the lung. It tends to grow and spread quickly, unlike the adenocarcinoma wherein before it spread, it could already been diagnosed. However, in terms of the lung cell carcinoma or undifferentiated carcinoma, so it grows and spread quickly, which makes it harder to treat. So it is a subtype or there is a subtype of the large cell carcinoma, which is known as large cell neuroendocrine carcinoma. And this one is a fast growing cancer. Okay, that is very similar to small cell cancer. Okay, so we're done with the different subtypes of non-small cell lung cancer. So hoping that everything is good and clear. If not, you could always replay and re-listen on the different subtypes of our NSCLC. So the next type of lung cancer is the SCLC, or the small cell lung cancer. So these are about 10 to 15% of all of the lung cancer. And they are sometimes called as oat cell cancer. Okay? So this type of lung cancer tends to grow and spread faster than the non-small cell lung cancer. Okay? They are telling that about 70% of people with small cell lung cancer will have cancer that has already spread at the time they are diagnosed. So since this cancer grows quickly, it tends to respond well to chemotherapy and radiation therapy. Unfortunately, for most people, the cancer will return at some point. Okay? So that is the sad part when it comes to the small cell lung cancer. So if we have 80 plus 15, that is 95%. So there's still another 5% missing. And these are the other types of lung tumors. Okay? So what are the different or the other types of lung tumors? So here we could see two, the lung carcinoid tumor and the other lung tumors. Okay? So for our lung carcinoid tumors, so carcinoid tumors of the lung account to fewer than 5% of the lung tumor, and usually they grow slowly. Okay, just like the non-small cell lung cancer, that they grow and spread slowly, unlike the small cell lung cancer. Okay, however, the remaining few percent are the other lung tumor. So other types of lung cancer, such as adenoid cystic carcinomas, we have lymphomas and sarcomas, as well as benign lung tumor, such as hematomas, are very rare. Okay? So they are very rare. So when it comes with the manifestations, so because of the obstruction that they are experiencing, that our clients are experiencing, so most likely we could be able to notice that our patient will have nagging cough. Okay? Because they feel that there's something that is obstructing their airway. And the tendency is for us to be able to push it away or to push it out. That's why there's always a nagging cough. Okay? We all know that we keep on coughing. We could experience chest pain, and later on, there could be dyspnea. Okay? Aside from that, sometimes we could also notice a shortness of breath, and to the extent because of too much exertion on coughing, we could be able to notice that there is a diminishing breath sound. Okay, and later on, it will result to hemoptysis. Okay, and common among all of the cancer is that they might or they will experience weight loss. Okay, so next. So of course, we need to know what could be the preventive measure. What are the things that we could do, okay, so that we would not have lung cancer. So one is don't smoke. Earlier, we've already discussed that cigarette smoking causes about 80 to 90% of lung cancer deaths in the US. Okay? So I guess it's not only in the US, but in the whole world, cigarette smoking really is one of the precursor of having lung cancer. And not actually lung cancer alone, even other types of cancer. So the most important thing that you can do to prevent lung cancer is not to start smoking. So if you haven't tried it, do not attempt trying it. And if you are a smoker, so try to quit smoking. Okay, we could also need to avoid secondhand smoke. Okay, so smoke from other people's cigarettes or cigar or pipes is called as secondhand smoke. Okay, so make our home, our car, our environment smoke free as much as possible. Next, get your home tested for for radon and asbestos, because we all know that these chemicals could be the etiologic agent or factor of us to have lung cancer. So usually those houses that were built in the 1950s, 1960s, um, most likely the things that were used in the building of those houses has asbestos on it. Okay, and lastly, be careful at work. Okay, so health and safety guidelines in workplace can help workers avoid the exposure of carcinogens. So again, carcinogens, those are the substances, the things that can cause cancer. Okay, so with all of that being said, so we need to take note of the diagnostic procedure. So before, I've told you that we could have a yearly, at least yearly chest X-ray for us to see. Okay. However, other diagnostics that could be used, there could be bronchoscopy so that they could visualize the lungs per se, and they could also use the low dose computed tomography. Okay. So for our management, from the ORCID that we have, remember ORCID, right? So O is operation, C is chemotherapy, okay? R is radiation therapy, H, hormonal therapy, I, immunotherapy, and B is bone marrow transplantation. For our patients with lung cancer, what we are only going to use are the CRIS, okay? Or it could be cryo. So we have the chemotherapy, radiation therapy, immunotherapy, and the surgery or the operation, okay? So let's start with chemotherapy. For chemotherapy, using special medicine to shrink, basically that's why we are doing chemotherapy, because we wanted to shrink or to kill the cancer cells, okay? So the drugs can be pills that clients could take in, or they could be given intravenously, or sometimes it could be done on a mixture. So the most common type of medications or chemo drugs that are given for clients with lung cancer could be cyclophosphamide, it could be methotrexate, or vincristine. So they are the most common medications or chemo drugs that are given for clients with lung cancer. So the next one, we have the radiation therapy. So our radiation therapy, for radiation therapy, we are using high energy rays. Okay, so these are similar to X-ray, and this high energy rays could be able to kill the cancer cells. Okay, for clients with lung cancer, radiation therapy is done or given to alleviate the pain, to alleviate the dyspnea and the hemoptysis that they are experiencing. Okay, so we wanted them to be as much as possible comfortable with what they are experiencing. That's why we are giving radiation therapy. Okay, so immunotherapy could also be a management, because we wanted to increase the immunity of our clients. And lastly, we have the operation or the surgery. So for our operation or surgery, it depends upon the extent of the cancer cells in the lungs. Okay, so they could have pneumonectomy, or they could have lobectomy. So we have the pneumonectomy or lobectomy. Okay, so what's the difference? Pneumonectomy, di ba? Ectomy means removal. Pneumo, lung. Okay? Lobectomy, ectomy is removal of the lobe. Okay, so that's the difference. When we deal with pneumonectomy, so it is the removal of the entire lung or one lung. Okay? So it is a surgical procedure wherein they're going to remove, for example, the whole right lung or the whole left lung. Okay? So with this, what are the nursing care that we need to do, the post-operative care that we need to do? One is we need to assess always the position of the trachea, okay, because it is prone for mediastinal shifting. So make sure that the trachea is always at the center. Why? Most likely because if we take off one of the lung, so it will be gearing towards on the other side more. Okay, so one of the things that we need to do is to assess the position of the trachea every now and then to prevent mediastinal shifting. Okay, make sure that as much as possible it is at the center. Okay. When it comes to the position, always remind that post-operative, post-pneumonectomy client needs to be positioned on the operative side. So meaning to say, for example, if they took off the right lung, they need to be positioned more on the right side, okay? Because we wanted to promote lung expansion on the left lung. Okay, an alternate position is to place the client on semi-Fowler's position. Okay, but you need to do this on an alternate basis. Okay, so make sure to position the patient on the operative side because we wanted to promote lung expansion. That is if the client had pneumonectomy. Okay, are we good? Are we clear? Uh-huh. Okay, so let's continue. The next one is lobectomy. Okay, for lobectomy, this is the removal of one lobe of a lung. Okay, basically, lobectomy is done if the lesion is limited to one area. Okay, if it is limited or the cancer cells are only in one lobe of a lung. Okay, so post-operative care, when it comes to the position, they could also be placed onto semi-fallers. However, we need to gear towards on the unaffected side. Unlike with pneumonectomy, we are gearing more on the affected area, on the operative side. However, for lobectomy, it's the other way around. We are gearing the pressure more. We wanted to take off the pressure on the affected. That's why we are positioning them more on the affected side. Okay? For clients with lobectomy, so there's a need for the use of the chest drainage, okay? Because we wanted to establish the negative pressure. We wanted to make sure that the lungs still have the negative pressure that it needs, okay? So basically, those are the things that you need to remember in terms of lung cancer. Okay, so hoping that we are all good. Okay, so let us continue with our next type of cancer. So the next type of cancer is the second most common type of cancer among women. Okay, and this is the breast cancer. For the breast cancer, usually it affects the upper outer quadrant of the breast. Okay, so hopefully you still remember how are we going um, to locate, okay, the area on the breast quadrants, okay? Always remember that the upper outer quadrant is the quadrant which includes the axilla, okay? So, um, why I'm telling the upper outer quadrant? Because most of the cases, majority of the cases, or at least 50% of the cases of breast cancer are on the upper outer quadrant. Okay? As to our etiology, so basically, um, We also have the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Okay, for the possible reasons on acquiring breast cancer. A is the age. So if you are 50 years old and above, there's a higher risk that you're going to have breast cancer. Okay, next is advanced maternal age. If you had pregnancy that is quite, you are quite old to be pregnant, like if your first pregnancy is 35 years old, that's why here it states that on letter F, if the first child is happened after 35 years old, so it is considered an advanced maternal age, and there would be an increase on the possibility that you would acquire breast cancer. Okay, so if you're alcohol drinker. Okay. Next is the breast cancer history within the family, especially if your mother or your sister or any first degree relative had breast cancer, because most likely you also have the BRCA1 gene, which is known to be the carrier of the breast cancer. Okay, so again, BRCA1 gene. Okay. Next, cigarette smoker. Earlier, we've already been told that most of our cancers are being brought by cigarette smoking. Okay, next is the diet. Okay, so usually if you have an increased um, intake of fats, usually you might be obese, especially if you have sedentary lifestyle. Okay, usually they are also telling that if you are obese and having sedentary lifestyle, there is a bigger possibility that you will acquire diabetes and hypertension. And they have found out that most of the patients with breast cancer also has diabetes and hypertension. Okay? So the next one, we have the early menarche and the late menopause. So how could we say that that is an early menarche? Again, when we talk about menarche, it means that the first menstrual period, okay? So how could we say that that is an early menarche? If you had your first menstruation before 11 years old, so it is considered early menarche. Okay? And we also need to look if you have late menopause. Okay? So it is considered to be late menopause if you started to menopause after 50 years old. Okay? So next, family history. We've already discussed this because of the breast cancer history. Well, actually, it's not only breast cancer that could result to breast cancer. It's not only the BRCA1 gene, but even other genes that could result to a breast cancer. Okay? And if you had your first child after 35 years old because of the hormonal imbalances that you might experience. And next, for letter G, we have gravida zero or nullipara, those who haven't had a pregnancy and haven't give birth are more susceptible in having breast cancer. And lastly, if you have hormonal replacement therapy intake, and if you have also history of uterine cancer and fibrocystic diseases, okay? So those are the possible etiology of acquiring breast cancer. Okay? So here are the different types of breast cancer. So we have two types. We have the ductal, invasive ductal carcinoma. Okay, so we could see that it is in the duct, the problem is in the duct per se. Okay, and we have the invasive lobular carcinoma. So the problem is on the lobe. Okay? So let's try to differentiate one with the other. When we are dealing with ductal carcinoma, so the cancer cell grow outside the ducts into other parts of the breast tissue. So invasive cancer cells can also spread it can also metastasize to other parts of the body. So that is for our ductal carcinoma. So for our lobular carcinoma, here, the cancer cells spread from the lobes to the breast tissue that are close by. So the cancer cell starts at the lobe or the different lobes of the breast, and it will spread on the other breast tissues that are near it. So this invasive cancer cell can also spread to other parts of the body. Okay? So here are the possible manifestations or the possible clinical signs. You need to be cautious. Sorry, you need to be cautious. Okay? You need to be cautious on this manifestation. So always remember breast, B-R-E-A-S-T, breast. Okay? So these are bleeding, or if you have nipple discharges, okay, unusual nipple discharges. Of course, if you're lactating and there are milk coming out, so that's normal. However, if that is blood or other discharges coming out from the nipple, so that's a warning sign. Okay? So if you have a retracted nipple, there you could see an example of retracted nipple. So retracted nipple could also be a warning sign that there is a possibility that you might have breast cancer. Okay? So elevation of one breast. Yes, I know normally one breast is lower as compared to the other one. However, it is not that evident. Okay, it is not that evident. So when we talk about elevation of one breast, we could see the difference right away. Okay, how one is elevated and one is dangling too much. Okay. Next is asymmetry of the breast. So it is the size of the breast. It is not only the elevation of one with the other, but the size of each breast. Maybe one is a size of a watermelon and the other one is a size of a papaya. Okay, so that is asymmetry on the breast. So another thing that is very common for clients with breast cancer is this. You could see um, pinpoint depression on the skin, on the breast skin. So we call it as skin dumpling or skin dimpling. Okay, skin dimpling, or it looks like an orange peel skin. If you look at the skin of the orange, it looks like the same because of the dimples that it makes. Usually it happens because of the adherence of the muscle and the skin. Okay? And lastly, we have the thickening or a lump. Upon inspection and upon palpation, you could be able to see that there is a thickening or there is a lump in the breast. And usually this is the first sign that people would notice. Okay, the thickening or the lump. Okay, so what are the things that we can do to prevent breast cancer? Okay, so there's quite a lot of things that you could do for you to prevent breast cancer. So first, you need to keep a healthy weight. Okay, usually daw that a breast cancer is common among obese, as what we have said on the etiology. So for you to be able to keep a healthy weight, you need to do exercise regularly. Okay? So as much as possible, don't drink alcohol, or you may limit alcoholic drinks. Okay? If you are taking or have been told to take hormone replacement therapy, an external icon or oral contraceptives, external icon like birth control pills, you need to ask your doctor about the risk and find out if it is right for you. Okay, there's no perfect formula when it comes to birth control. Okay, so it is case to case basis. So next thing is breastfeed your children if possible, because it would lessen the possibility of acquiring breast cancer. So if you will notice, breastfeeding is not only good for the babies, but it is also good for the mommies. Okay? And if you have a family history of breast cancer, or if you have inherited changes in your BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes, so you need to talk to an expert or a doctor, or a possible things on how you would be able to lower your risk of acquiring breast cancer. For instance, I just want to tell you that Angelina Jolie have had a surgery wherein they take off her breast because of the history within the family. Okay? And lastly, what you need to do is to have your monthly breast self-examination. Okay, so who needs to do the monthly breast examination? So if you are 20 years old and above, you need to start doing your breast self-examination. Okay, and it should be done after menstrual cycle. Okay, because obviously before menstruation and during menstruation, there is tenderness on your breast. Okay? So how are you going to do it? You need to do it on standing position first. Okay, so during standing position, what you need to do is to assess your breast. Take note of the symmetry of the breast, the elevation, how it looks like. Remember the things that we have discussed on the different manifestations or signs and symptoms of of breast cancer. You need to look at on those things. So after doing that, you need to lie down. That is the best position, so that we could be able to palpate properly the breast tissues. Okay? So you need to elevate your shoulder. So for you to be able to elevate the shoulder on the side to be examined, we could put a small pillow there, then start to palpate your breast. Okay? And palpating the breast, start with the periphery, going to the center in circular motion. So what do you need to look at? You need to look for any firm, non-tender, non-mobile mass. Okay? I will be posting a video on our themes for you to be able to study more on how to do the breast self-examination. Okay? So those are the possible preventive measures. Plus, of course, if you are going to have different diagnostic procedures, okay? So here are the possible diagnostic procedure for us to know if you or if our client has breast cancer. So the first one is mammography. We've already discussed mammography before. So basically, this will tell whether there are calcification and masses. Okay, they could undergo aspiration biopsy to see whether it is cancerous or not, whether it is benign or not. Okay. So aside from that, we have the serum tumor marker. So once again, what is the serum tumor marker for our breast cancer? Anyone? Come on. Who wants to volunteer? Okay, yes, that is the CA15-3, or the cancer antigen 15-3. Okay, so we could also do the staging. Okay, in doing the staging, we could take note of the TNM. Okay, the TNM, the tumor, the nodes, the lymph nodes, and the metastasis. Okay, we could also do a staging with lymphangiography. We've already discussed before what's lymphangiography and why it is done. For the staging for our breast cancer, we have four different stages. Okay, so it could be considered as a stage 1 if the tumor size is up to 2 centimeter. So stage 1 is if the tumor size is up to 2 centimeter. Stage 2, if the tumor size is up to 5 centimeter. Okay, 5 centimeter. And it involves the axillary lymph nodes. Okay, so for it to become stage 2, it should be at least maximum of 5 centimeter. So 2.1 to 5 centimeter. Plus, there is an involvement of the axillary lymph node. So it is stage 3. Stage 3, if the tumor size is more than 5 centimeter, and it affects the axillary and the neck lymph nodes. And lastly, we have stage 4. So stage 4 is given if there are metastases to distant organs. So the most common organ that could be affected by metastasis could be liver, lungs, bone, and even the brain. Okay? So other diagnostic tests that could be done, there could be breast ultrasound, and they could also undergo MRIs. Okay? So management, what are we going to do? So the management for clients with breast cancer is ORCID. So we have operation, radiation therapy, chemotherapy, hormonal therapy, immunotherapy, and instead of having bone marrow transplantation, there is the biological therapy. Okay? So let's start with the operation or surgery. So for the operation or surgery, it could be lumpectomy or tylectomy. We have simple mastectomy, radical mastectomy, and modified radical mastectomy. So we need to differentiate this four, okay? So first, when we deal with lumpectomy or tylectomy, so this is known as partial mastectomy, okay? This is a partial mastectomy. Why? Because there is only the removal of the lump and the surrounding breast tissues. Okay, that's why it's lumpectomy, removal of the lump. So this is the removal of the lump and the surrounding breast tissue. Okay, so the next type of operation that could be done is the simple mastectomy. Okay, for simple mastectomy, it involves the removal of the entire breast only. So what is being removed, that's why it's simple, is the entire breast. Meaning to say that the pectoralis muscle and the nipples are still intact. Okay, they are spared from the operation. So next, we have the radical mastectomy. Radical mastectomy is also known as Halsted, okay? Halsted surgery. Halsted surgery, H-A-L-S-T-E-A-D. H-A-L-S-T-E-A-D surgery. So it is radical because there's quite a lot of things that are being removed on this type of operation. So unlike with the simple mastectomy, it is only the breast and we are sparing the pectoralis muscle and the nipple. So obviously for radical mastectomy, so there is the removal of the breast, the removal of the pectoral muscles, the fascia, and the lymph nodes. Okay? So that's radical mastectomy. Okay. And lastly, we have the modified radical mastectomy. So modified, so there are things that are being spared. Okay, they are not taking everything, unlike with the radical mastectomy. So for our modified radical mastectomy, so this is a surgical removal of the entire breast, including the axillary lymph nodes, but the pectoralis muscle are being spared. Okay? The pectoralis muscle are being spared or they are still intact. Okay? So things that you need to remember if the patient is for operation, so or post-operative things that we need to do for clients who undergone this operation. Okay, so what are the post-operative care for clients with breast cancer? So things that we need to do, always remember breast. Okay, breast. Ang management na the post-operative management that we could do for clients is breast. First is bleeding. So always assess and look for the bleeding. Try to look at for the drainage. Okay, so we could be able to monitor this because most likely if they had an operation, they are attached into a hemovac or a Jackson Pratt. So hemovac and Jackson Pratt um, are things that are used to collect those discharges, those output. So normally we could be able to see on the first 24 hours that the output or the discharges or the drainage that we are having are sinusangrenous. Okay? Um, so that is normal. But beyond that, it should be lessen after a while. Okay? So other things that we need to do is we need to check the patient's back. Since the patient are always on a supine position, we need to check the patient's back because most likely because of the force of the gravity, if there's bleeding, so the blood will be dripping to the back, okay, and not to our dressing. Okay, so we need to check the patient's back for bleeding because the blood flow of the back or the blood flow is going to the back because of the force of the gravity. So that's letter B, breast, bleeding. Okay, the B for the breast, which is bleeding, or checking for the drainage or discharges. Okay, the next one is R. So R is ROM. Okay, ROM, range of motion, meaning to say we need to, if possible, we start to do exercises, okay? Because we wanted to prevent any contractures on the shoulder girdle. So most likely, if they cannot move it alone, if they cannot do an active range of motion, maybe we could do active assistive or even passive range of motion, okay? Aside from moving the shoulder girdle, we could also encourage them to do regular calving exercises and deep breathing exercises. Okay, so that's for letter R. So next, E, elevate the affected limb. Okay, so for example, if the operative side is the right, the right upper extremities always needs to be elevated. Okay, so we could place the client on semifaller's position and her arm elevated on a pillow. Okay, and usually it is on an abducted position. We wanted to do this, the elevation of the upper extremity, for us to be able to promote venous return, okay? For us to be able to promote venous return, and hopefully we could prevent lymphedema, okay? We wanted to prevent lymphedema on the affected arm. Okay. So since I've already told you about lymphedema, so what are the possible things that we could teach our clients to to prevent having lymphedema? So upon going out, upon discharge, so they need to avoid cats, cuts as in cuts, okay, cuts or any wounds, scrapes or insect bite or burn or use of any strong detergent on the affected side. We wanted them not to have any type of wound on the affected side because it will just increase the possibility of having lymphedema. Okay, we also need to tell them, even they are, it is already fully healed, not to carry um, coin first or heavy object on the affected side. So if you are also a nurse who's taking care of a patient who had surgery on the breast, on that area, it is not advisable for you to get the blood pressure on that area. Always use the other extremity. Okay? So, because we don't want them to be restricted. Okay, so with that, we also need to tell them to refrain from using wristwatches and any jewelry on the affected side. Okay, always do that on the other side. Okay, if they really need to do the laundry, they always need to wear loose rubber gloves. Okay, even in washing the dishes, because sometimes the detergent soap are too strong and it could irritate the skin. If they need to sew something, okay, if they need to sew clothings, so they need to wear thimbles, okay, and always apply hand cream for us to prevent dryness on the area. Okay, so those are the post-operative health teachings that we could give for clients who undergone operation because of breast cancer to prevent lymphedema. Okay, so we're done with the B, which is the bleeding, the R, which is ROM, E is elevate, the affected limb. So next is letter A. So for letter A, always assess the blood pressure on the unaffected side. Okay, always assess the blood pressure on the affected side. Again, we don't want to constrict the affected area because it could lead to lymphedema later on. Okay, next, letter S, support the arm. Okay, for example, if this is the arm that, or this is the area, we have the right-sided modified radical mastectomy. At first, we need to tell the patient to use sling on their affected area so that it won't weigh much. Okay. And last is teachings, the health teachings that we need to do. So the health teachings include still, we could tell them to do the breast self-examination on the other side, okay, on the other side. Next, if they already have lymphedema or if they had undergone the surgery, they always need to wear a medic alert bracelet or to have an ID that they've undergone certain procedures so that healthcare professionals know and they won't do anything on the affected side. Okay. They could also do some exercises. For exercises, they could do some arm exercises like different wall arm exercises. Okay. They could also join a support group or things that would help them feel the femininity on their side, okay? Because most of them decreases self-esteem after, because they are used to having a breast, then they don't have anymore, okay? So it would affect their self-esteem. So they could have support group and things that would also raise their feminine image. And lastly, we could also tell them to to engage on swimming because it would help them um, because it is a whole body exercise and it will also lessen the possibility of having lymphedema. Okay? So next, we have radiation therapy. Okay, radiation therapy could be done alone for breast cancer or it could be done in conjunction with our surgery. By the way, most likely, according to research, surgery are the best possible way to manage cancer. Okay, so that's why early detection is a must. Okay. So if we are doing radiation therapy, usually they could be able to reduce the lesion and it could also limit the metastasis. Okay, next, chemotherapy. For our chemotherapy, all of the four categories that we have discussed before could be given for clients with breast cancer. Hormonal therapy, so this is used to block cancer cells from getting the hormones they need to grow. So since estrogen usually is the common hormone that causes breast cancer. So they could be given tamoxifen. So hopefully that you still remember tamoxifen from the previous discussion that we have. So immunotherapy, because we wanted to increase the immune system of the patient. And lastly, we have the biological therapy that works with your body's immune system to help fight cancer cells or to at least control the side effects of the different cancer treatments that you are having. Okay? So basically, that is breast cancer. So let's move on to the last type of cancer that we're going to discuss for today and part of our exam, and that is the prostate cancer. So, prostate cancer is the most common male cancer. Okay, it is the most common male cancer, and this is second in ranking. Okay, among American men. When we deal with prostate cancer, it is known to be an androgen-dependent adenocarcinoma, meaning to say that prostate cancer is secondary to testosterone. Okay? So here are the possible etiology of a prostate cancer. So, famoso. It's just like being famous. Okay? So, famoso. So, family history. We all know that cancer are genetically linked. Okay? Age. For age, usually prostate cancer is common for those who are older men, usually 65 years old and above, okay, who have a multiple sexual partner, those who are sexually active. Okay, when it comes to the race, it is more common among African American men who likes to have smoking or been exposed to chemical carcinogens like air pollution, and they are also common among those clients who are obese, maybe because of the choices of foods that they have. Okay. So for the type of prostate cancer, almost all, around 98 to 99% of prostate cancer are adenocarcinoma. Okay? So this cancer is developed from the gland, from the prostate per se. So the cells that make the prostate fluid that is added to the semen is our prostate gland. And the adenocarcinoma or the cancer cells basically develop on that gland, our prostate gland. Okay? So possible manifestations. So one of the first thing that they are noticing for prostate cancer is the changes in the bladder pattern. Okay? There could be changes on the frequency of urination, the urgency, and sometimes they could experience difficulty of initiating stream. That's why here we could be able to see that one of the early manifestation that we could take note is problems in urinating. It includes a slow or weak urinary stream or the need to urinate more often, especially at night. Okay? Sometimes they could also experience blood in the urine or even in the semen. Okay, they could also experience trouble getting an erection, so they could have erectile dysfunction if you have prostate cancer. Sometimes there is pelvic node involvement, okay, and the perineal pain. So usually they could say that they could experience pain upon defecation, okay, because if you will notice the passageway of the feces or stool is just adjacent to the prostate gland. Okay, that's why if there are increasing size in the prostate cancer, in the prostate gland, it means that there would be a lesser space for the poop or for the stool to come out. That's why they could experience pain in defecation. Okay, that would radiate down to the hips and the legs. So that is why they could complain of a pain in the hips, the back, even on the chest or other areas from the cancer that has spread to the bones if it already metastasized. Okay, and lastly, they could be experiencing weakness or numbness in the legs or feet, or even loss of bladder or bowel control because of the cancer cells or the tumor that is pressing on the spinal cord. Okay. So preventive measures, what are the things that we could tell them to prevent having prostate cancer? So first is look at the body weight, the physical activity, and the diet. We need to have everything at moderation. So it needs to be in normal limits. Okay. So they could have vitamins, minerals, and other supplements. For example, vitamin E and selenium. So according to some early studies that taking vitamin E or selenium supplements might lower the risk of having prostate cancer. So soy and isoflavones, according to other researchers, suggest possible benefit, okay, that they could get from those foods that could also lower the risk of having prostate cancer. So medication. Okay, so we are being told that this is caused by testosterone, so we need to limit the testosterone level. Okay, so some drugs might help reduce the risk for prostate cancer, like 5-alpha reductase inhibitors and aspirin. So for our diagnostics, so we could have the prostate specific antigen. So we've already discussed this, that if there's an increased PSA, it could suggest problem in the prostate gland. And through the digital rectal examination, if you will notice, they will be examining the prostate gland through the rectum, okay, and it will reveal hardened prostate. Okay. So management. So for our management, remember prostate. So that's prostate. Okay. P is the pain management. Usually since they are old already, so they are not being subjected to undergo much treatment unless it is what the patient and the family likes. Okay. So, however, as human beings, we still need to take care for them and manage the pain that they are experiencing. Okay, so one of the possible surgery that they could have is radical prostatectomy. Okay, so this is done by perineal or retropubic approach. So for the radical prostatectomy, it's radical, so there's quite a lot to be removed. So this is the removal of the prostate, seminal vesicle, and the portion of the bladder. If the client is for radical prostatectomy, so post-operative care are needed. We need to look at for the possible complications after the surgery, like there could be some incontinence and even impotence. Okay. After the surgery, we also need to observe for the signs of hemorrhage. Um, because we know that if there's hemorrhage, it could lead to hypovolemic shock later on. We could also maintain the patency of the catheter so that the urine output is continuously flowing. Okay. And because of that, we need to monitor the intake and output of the patient. When it comes to the stool, um, make sure that the client won't have constipation. So with doctor's order, we could give stool softener for them. So if there's no doctor's order yet, so we could use some things like, for example, look at the diet or the fluid consumption of the patient. Okay? Next, if the patient is over 70 years old, what we just need to do is palliative care, meaning to say no treatment. We are not that vigorous enough to give management for the patient, but what we need to do is to give them palliative care. We need to give comfort measures and hospice care that they are needing. Okay? Next, letter S. Actually, I just push it to be prostate, but it's estrogen or the DES or the diethyl stilbestrol. Okay? Because we wanted to decrease the testosterone. I've told you a while ago that the hormone that causing this is the testosterone. So if we have decreased testosterone, so it would decrease the tumor size. It could also um, reduce the size of an inoperable lesion, and it could also limit the homeostasis, or sorry, the metastasis. It could also limit the metastasis that the client would experience. Okay? Next, we have letter T. T is testicular removal. We all know that the surgical procedure once the testicle is removed is known as orchiectomy. Why are we going to remove the testicle? Because we wanted to limit the testosterone production, because that is the precursor of having prostate cancer. Okay? So it's like castration. So next is anti-cancer medication. So meaning to say chemo drugs, all of the categories of drugs, of chemo drugs that we have discussed before could also be given for clients with prostate cancer. Next, we also need to teach them to express. Express what? They need to be able to express, to verbalize their concerns and sexual functioning, especially if they are quite young. Okay? And lastly is the radiation therapy. So both external and internal radiation therapy could be given and could be done for clients with prostate cancer. So if that is external radiation therapy, usually they are using the external beam. And if that is an internal radiation therapy, they could be implanted with seeds. Okay? So basically, those are our lung cancer, breast cancer, and prostate cancer. So hoping that everything is good and clear. If you have questions, you could approach me. If you have questions in terms of the discussions, you could always message me or approach me so that we could clarify things. Okay? And hopefully everything is good and clear. So, with that being said, I want to thank you all for staying and for listening. So, once again, this is Dr. A. Estiva, and hoping that this discussion would help you a lot with your future endeavors. So, maraming salamat po, and see you again next time. Okay, thank you.